May the learning tonight be zchut, continued success for all the chayalim, and also everyone who needs yeshuot, refuot, and everything else. May they be answered quickly. So this week we learn Parshat Pinchas. Pinchas always falls out during the first week of the 3 weeks. We're not going to be covering that aspect of that in this week's Drush. This Drush that we're going to learn is Drush 6 of Parshat Pinchas. Parshat Pinchas is famous for having the korbanot of the different festivals, and the Zera Shimshon starts by in Drush 6. He talks about it's kind of tangentially. He mentions the idea that obviously on the Chagim, except for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, on all the other Chagim we say Hallel. And on that note, the Zera Shimshon starts by bringing the Midrash from Yalkut Shimoni on Tehillim, where he says, Zeh Yom Asah Hashem Nagila v'nismecha bo. Yalkut Shimoni says there that this is the famous pasuk that we say in Hallel, towards the end of Hallel, and it says the Midrash says, Amar Rabbi Avin, Ein anu yodim b'meh lismach im bayom im b'kadosh baruch hu. So the question is, Rabbi Abin asks the question, we don't know which one, because the word of bo is ambiguous, but Rabbi Abin asks the question, we don't know whether we should be glad on the festival, meaning we should be celebrating the festival on the day itself, meaning through eating and drinking and assuming bo means with it the day itself, the hayom, or im b'kadosh baruch hu, or with the Hashem itself, meaning by doing tefillah and learning, etc. Right, because bo can be applied if you read the word, the pasuk Zeh Yom Asah Hashem Nagila v'nismecha bo. So bo can apply either to Hashem, therefore it would be davening and learning, or hayom, and therefore it would be applying to the day itself, meaning us celebrating with eating and enjoying the day. So it says here, Bashlomo. The Midrash continues. Bashlomo ufaresh Nagila v'nismecha bach b'shuatcha, bach b'yiratcha, bach b'toratcha. So the Midrash then continues and quotes a pasuk that's very similar, Nagila v'nismecha bach, which is similar to the pasuk that we just read from Tehillim. So the pasuk, the Midrash says, Nagila v'nismecha bach. Bach means b'shuatcha, means with your salvation. We should be bach, meaning with your awe, meaning your presence. Bach with your Torah. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Then the Midrash continues. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Another interpretation of the verse in Zera Shimshon says Bach, because Bach is the word kaf bet otiyot shebekatavta lem b'Torah. Bach is bet shnaim, kaf is 20. Therefore, the gematria of Bach is 22. So we use the 22 letters. Kaf esrim hari Bach. Thus, the 22 letters of the Torah are represented in the word Bach, and therefore we kind of implies that we should be learning the Torah. So that's basically the Midrash. So we have a Rabbi Avin who says that we don't know what should we be celebrating, meaning how should we be celebrating the day of the Chag, or any of the Chagim for that matter. So now the Zera Shimshon starts his question. He raises a few questions about the Midrash, which is his standard kind of format. He starts with the Midrash and then he asks questions about it. Kashem ma'u hasafek shnolad lo pasuk zeh, alo gam b'lo pasuk zeh yesh lanu safek. Mishum detrei krai tivat. Right. So the question Zera Shimshon asks is, what uncertainty does Rabbi Avin have with this verse, with this pasuk? Right. Even without this pasuk, even with the ambiguity of this pasuk, even without this pasuk at all, even this pasuk was not written in the Torah. Right. We still have this. We have Mishum detrei krai ketiva. There are two psukim that contradict themselves that are found actually in the Torah, not necessarily in Tehillim. The famous pasuk is Atzeret Lashem Lokecha. One pasuk mentions that we should have Atzeret Lashem Lokecha, means it should be for Hashem, and the other pasuk says Atzeret Yelachem, it should be for you, and therefore both of them actually appear in Devarim, about 13 prakim away from each other. Either way, you have a contradiction. One says that you should be celebrating the Chag, celebrating Atzeret, or in this case maybe all the Chagim, for personal enjoyment, meaning eating, drinking, celebrating with family, whatever it may be. And the other one says Atzeret Lashem Lokecha, which means you should be celebrating for your Shem, with Hashem, meaning davening, learning, etc. So the Zera Shimshon is saying is, what is Rabbi Avin so bothered by with the question is whether I don't understand what the festival, what the Chagim, how we should be celebrating the pasuk. The contradiction exists before the Midrash itself. Therefore, we must be answering. We must be, as the Chachamim say in Masechet Beitza, Kedamrina Bereish Perek Bet Masechet Yom Tov. This is the famous argument or famous machloket between the two factors, the two opinions on this matter. Rabbi Eliezer, that the Torah, either we say that it goes by Rabbi Eliezer Kulo Lashem, Rabbi Kulo Lashem O Kulo Lachem. Rabbi Eliezer says that one has to choose to devote the Chag either totally to Hashem through learning and davening, or totally for you through eating and drinking. Rabbi Yoshua, or as Rabbi Yoshua says, Chalkeu. Rabbi Yoshua says that we split it, meaning Chetzio Hashem, Bechetzio Lachem, and we devote half and half to Hashem and to yourselves. Right? That's I believe that the final decision at the halacha is that we follow. That is indeed the way we follow it. It should be half and half during the Chagim. Obviously, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah might be a little bit different, but most Chagim are Chetzio Hashem, Chetzio Lachem. V'hachinami b'pasuk hazeh yachol teretz kach. With the verse in the Tehillim, we can say the same thing. Since it's not clear in the simple reading of the pasuk of since we can't read, it's not clear which way, how we should interpret it. But in other words, both are acceptable. And therefore they should both be recognized as valid answers, right? Because either way, if you don't accept, which one would you exclude? Right? There's no way to say one is right or the other because the pasuk itself is ambiguous, and since we can't make a reconciliation in the way the pasuk is read, therefore we have to say they're both right. Okisvarat Rabbi Eliezer, we might say that the Chagim should be celebrated like Rabbi Eliezer and choose between celebrating with Hashem by spending time, the whole day engaged in learning and davening, or should we say, or by completely focusing on eating and drinking. Okisvarat Rabbi Yeshua. Right. Either way, what then was Rabbi Avin's uncertain regard? What was he so bothered by? Right, because the pasuk is so ambiguous, therefore we have to say they're both right. So either way, even without this pasuk in Tehillim, we still have a machloket that exists that was based on the Masechet Beitza. But Rabbi Avin it seems to be bothered by. But even so, he seems that the Zera Shimshon seems to be saying is. Since there's no real answer, right? Or since Bo doesn't necessarily give us a full, clear answer as to which way we should be going, and since then Rabbi Zera Shimshon says, I don't understand what's different between what Rabbi Avin said and what the Machloket said in Beitza. There's no answer because it doesn't necessarily. Bo could be excluding something else. If we say Bo, it means there's something else to exclude, and since it's excluding something, we have to assume that there's a contradiction. But he says, even so, we have this issue that Rabbi Avin is uncertain about something, and we still don't understand how it is. Now, that's the first question, is how is Rabbi Avin, or what's bothering Rabbi Avin with this little bit uncertainty that's going on in this pasuk? Just to clarify, we're going to go back with a quick summary. So basically what we have is the Midrash says, that's in the sixth drush in Parshat Pinchas, based because we talk about the Chagim, and we talk about the korbanot of the Chagim, so the Zera Shimshon adds this, throws this midrash into this perush into Parshat Pinchas. So he quotes a midrash that says that Rabbi Avin doesn't know whether we do half to Hashem or completely to Hashem and completely to completely to ourselves. That's the famous, like I said, famous machloket in the Gemara. And Rabbi Avin says that I don't understand because bo is such an ambiguous term. Then the midrash continues by saying that Shlomo Melech comes and says, that's in Shir Hashirim, and there he says Bach b'shuatcha, Bach b'yaratcha, Bach b'toratcha. Therefore, he's saying is that Bach maybe means more towards. That doesn't necessarily answer the question, and we're going to get to the question as to why Shlomo Melech specifically said it, and we're going to get there in a second. And then the last part of the midrash says Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bach, since it's 22 letters that we wrote in the Torah, that means that we should be focusing maybe on the Torah. So then the question that Zera Shimshon asks is what is even without the pasuk that we still have this problem of, even without this pasuk, we still have this machloket that exists in Masechet Beitza, and that machloket is whether we follow Rabbi Eliezer who says either it's Kulol Hashem or Kulol Lachem, right? So therefore, since we can't, or we say Rabbi Yeshua who says Chetziol Hashem v'Chetziol Lachem. Either way, that's the first question, meaning that what the Zera Shimshon is bothered is what is so uncertain by, what is Rabbi Avin so uncertain by, what he's so concerned with, because what is he unsure about, because machloket exists even without this pasuk. Then the next one is the next question that the Zera Shimshon asks is. Even though after Rabbi Avin seems to have, once he seems to have resolved his question with using the pasuk, the second pasuk, which is from Shir Hashirim, right? The mashma shekol simchat b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? If we read the midrash and it says first he says I don't understand which one we do, and then all of a sudden he says Shlomo Melech. Shlomo Melech seems to, the way the midrash reads, Shlomo Melech seems to. The second pasuk, which is Nagilam Bach, which is very similar to Nagilam Bo, since we bring that pasuk right after the first part of Rabbi Avin's question, so therefore it seems that the midrash is saying is, you have a question, Rabbi Avin, I'm bringing you a pasuk that gives me the answer, which is Bach b'shuatcha, Bach b'yiratcha, Bach b'toratcha, meaning that should be all for Hashem, right? So therefore, the Mashra shekol simchat b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kasha ben Rabbi Ezer ben Yoshua. Therefore, we have the first. Then, therefore, when we have this pasuk. Right, we have this problem, this kasha. Therefore, we have a question. Either way, we have a question based either by Rabbi Ezer or by Yeshua, because either we say that Rabbi Ezer was a choice of devoting the day, meaning he says it's kulol Hashem to kulol Lachem, and therefore, and according to Rabbi Yeshua, he says one is required to basically split the day, right? But since the verse in the pasuk in Shir Hashirim says, the verse in Tehillim teaches that the festival is meant, the Chag is meant to be entirely in service of Hashem. So basically, we have that in the midrash, it seems that it should be all to Hashem. The quandary is like this. Very good question. Good question. So the answer is. Do a little bit of summary as well. I'm doing a summary again. I'll do it a third time. Right. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. So the midrash says on the pasuk, the reason why it's brought here is because. I'm going to get you a second. Because in Parshat Pinchas we mentioned the Chagim, the Zera Shimshon opens this the Korbanot of the Chagim. Excuse me, the Korbanot of the Chagim. He says that he brings a midrash of Drush Vav. He brings a midrash that quotes the pasuk that says Zeh Hayom Asa Hashem Nagilah V'Zechabo, which we say in Hallel of the Chagim.
It's not in the Parsha.
It's not in the Parsha at all. So this is the only reason why it's associated to this week's Parsha is because of the Chagim that we mentioned, the Korbanot of the Chagim. So that's the association. So okay, it's a stretch, but I think sometimes what happens with the Zera Shimshon is that he, had an idea, he thought of it, and then he puts it in.
Maybe he was learning that sukkah.
Maybe he was learning. I don't know. It doesn't make. Well, no, it could be Holchot Yom Tov, whatever it is. Anyway, so there's a famous machloket in the Gemara in Masechet Beitzah, but we'll get to that in a second. So the Midrash says, Kuchimoni says, is Zeh Yom Asa Hashem Nagilim Zechabo, and then Rabbi Avin is bothered by this question. Is the word bo is ambiguous. Zeh Yom Asa Hashem Nagilim Zechabo could be either talking about Hashem, Zeh Yom Asa Hashem, Nagilim Zechabo meaning bo b'Hashem. Or it could say Zayom, and then the bo replies to Hayom. So then he says, I don't understand. It doesn't apply fully to Hashem. It doesn't apply fully to us. Meaning, how do we understand?
It's about the day. It's not about us.
Well, us meaning that we celebrate the day with food and with drink, right? We don't necessarily it's not only davening and only learning, right? So now he says. So now the question. That's the first part of the midrash. Second part of the midrash says is then the midrash says Ba Shlomo HaMelech. Uferish Nagilav Nismecha Bach Bishuatcha Bach B'Toratcha Bach B'Toratcha. The pasuk from Shir Hashirim that says very similar in Nagilav Zechabo. And here it says Nagilav Zechabo Bach in Shir Hashirim, and there it says Bach means Bishuatcha means your salvation. Bach B'Toratcha with awe and your greatness. Bach B'Toratcha with learning. So there, more to Hashem. That's the question. That's the Zera Shimshon. That's the second question that Zera Shimshon reads. And now the third part of the midrash is that it says Amar Yitzchak. Bach, because the word Bach is 22, like the gematria of Bach is 22, we have to, we learn it with 22 letters of your alphabet, of the alphabet, and therefore the Torah.
It's not boy, it's not,
what?
It's boy, it's not Bach.
It's Bo or Bach. There are two psukim that are very similar. One is Bo and one is Bach. And that's why the Midrash says, well, you're trying to understand about the Chag, about Nidin Zechab Bo, and then all of a sudden you go to, and then he says, wait a minute, there's a pasuk that's almost identical except for the word Bach instead of Bo.
Which word is it? Which pasuk is it?
And the one in Tehillim it says Nagilah v'Nismecha Bo, and the one in Shir Hashirim it says Nagilah v'Nismecha Bach. So therefore he's saying is because we have two psukim that are so identical, it's very rare that you have a pasuk that's so identical. So he says, well, the midrash, which is very standard in terms of midrash style, is they take two psukim that are very similar and they try to make a correlation. So so far that's the midrash. Now the Zera Shimshon asks the question: is I don't understand, even without Rabbi Av, even without this pasuk without the question of Zera Yom Asah Hashem Nezucha Bo, we have a famous machloket that's mentioned in the Gemara already that says what? The Gemara is in Beitzah, and it says is Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua have a machloket. One says Kulo Lashem O Kulo Lachem, and the other one says is split it, just do half and half. Right, I believe that's the halach. Chatzi lachem, right? Chatzi lachem, right? So he says either it's one. Either Rabbi Eliezer says it's either one or the other, and the other Rabbi Yoshua says no. I'll make it a better. I have a better answer. Let's just do a 50-50 split, or split the day. Either which way, he says is that I don't really understand why Rabbi Avin is bothered. But like, didn't Rabbi Avin not know about the Gemara? Like that Gemara, even without the pasuk of Zelia.
Proof does the Gemara.
Right. I don't remember the answer to that question. I don't remember what he brings. But no, the machloket is based on Atzeret L'Hashem Lokecha, and then it says a few prakim later, it says Atzeret Tiyeh Lachem. So the same idea, the two.
So that's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's a similar.
It's a very similar idea. So then he says, but even so, Rabbi Avin shouldn't be bothered by the Agidas Chabo because the machloket exists already. So what's so special about this machloket? Or this issue that Rabbi Avin is having with the midrash or in the midrash, if the machloket exists already before that.
Right.
So that's his first question.
I once prayed in a shul in Yerushalayim for many years where the shaila there was Chetzi Lachem and Chetzi Lashem. They wanted so much the davening and the avodah of Yom Tov that for them was Lachem. To go home and eat with the family, that was Lashem. It was all the opposite to most people.
Anyway, so either way that's the first question. Now we have a question. Now, if you read based on what the midrash said, it seems like the second pasuk, which is from Zera Shimshon, it seems like it answers, like you said, it answers Rabbi Avin's question. Bach b'shuatcha, b'shuatach, b'yaratcha, b'toratcha. It seems to answer. Rabbi Avin says, I don't understand which one to do, and then the next part of the midrash says, no worries. Shir Shirim says Nagivas Chabach, and that answers b'toratcha. So therefore, your Torah, which means that it's really more to Hashem, like you said.
But that's not how we paskin.
That's not how we paskin. But the point is, that Zera Shimshon is asking the question. Is like, I don't get it. Why if Rabbi Avin if the midrash reads the way it does, then I don't understand why Rabbi Avin is so bothered by it. He answers his own. The midrash answers his question. Right, so that he answers. Now he says, and either way, if we answer that way, meaning that should be completely to Hashem, then we have a machloket. What do we have a problem with? The Gemara itself, because we have a problem with the Gemara, exactly. So therefore, we kind of see that this thing still stands, and that's why the Zera Shimshon seems to be bothered by it so much. Again, in classic Zera Shimshon style, these questions are usually pretty standard, straightforward. They're nothing, no like deep question. It's just something that you have to know the Gemara in order to understand the midrash. Now he said. Now he asks v'gam ala pasuk atzmo. Then he says, let's just say now that as the Gemara in Beitzah says, right, both Rabbi Yeshua are basically saying is that they don't understand the way they don't understand the psukim itself, which we said is Atzeret Lachem or Atzeret Lashem Lokecha. Right. So he says gam ala pasuk atzmo lama kativ lachem demashman nami lachem. Why does the word? Even if we read the pasuk, this is the Zera Shimshon's kind of third question, if you will. He says, "I don't understand." Let's look at the question. Let's look at the machloket in the Gemara, right? Let's look at the machloket there, and he says, "Is lama kativ lachem?" Why do we say? Why is it written at all lachem? Demashma nami lachem, right? Which implies that the simchat Yom Tov is also for you, right? O kulo chetzio. Either way, either totally in the view of Rabbi Eliezer or half of it in the view of Rabbi Yeshua, lemar kedita, lemar kedita. He says one according to one. Either way, we see from the psukim and Zera Shimshon that one should be devoted exclusively to Hashem. So he says is that I don't understand. He says the pasuk that they're bothered by in the Gemara. He says either way, if we say the word bach, right? If we're trying to make this whole connection, he says I don't understand. There's the pasuk itself seems to imply that lachem is in addition to what atzeret tiyeh. Lachem means in addition, above and beyond what the atzeret should be. Lachem is like an added part of it, so therefore it's really mostly to Hashem. And then lachem is lachem in addition to, or kind of 50-50, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking.
Go for it.
Good idea. What? Right. So the question to me is the nafkamina of lachem.
Right.
Right. Meaning, what is unique about a chag as opposed to Shabbat?
Right.
And that's the heter of bishul.
Right.
Right.
Right. We're going to get to that in a second. Not the bishul part, but what
nefesh, or
right.
whatever it might be. Right. So it means like the measurement of is it 50% or not? It's not really that. It's
right.
more that things that normally would have been prohibited
right.
are now
and then what do you make of that?
Allowed,
And what do you make? What do you make?
exactly.
Right. So I was going to get to that. Was my concluding story was how do we? Good. Okay. Anyway, so I'll talk. I'll give the concluding story at the end. So he says now.
Yeah, cut the ending.
It's actually a very, the truth is that his answer, the Zera Shimshon's answer, is very good in terms of the overall process and approach. But anyways, we'll go through that. Let's go through the drush. So he says, "V'yesh lomar." Now we can explain. Now the Zera Shimshon says, let's give. Now that we have three questions or three issues. One is Rabbi Avin's question is all. Why I don't understand why he's so bothered by this Nagilim Mizmachabo question at all. Like, it's not a big deal if you understand the machloket. They're back in the Gemara. The machloket in the Gemara exists even without the pasuk of Zera Yom Asa Hashem Nagilim Mizmachabo. It still exists. We have the machloket. So what is Rabbi Avin
There's a
so?
lot of times when you have psukim that you need to learn a drush.
Yeah, but
So it's like,
yeah,
what
but
do you do with these?
yeah, but you don't need it here. Like here, the machloket still exists. Then the question is, even if you understand, right? Even if you, after you say the word bach, the way the midrash reads, meaning the way that the Rabbi Avin at least reads the midrash, or the way we would read the midrash is that Rabbi Avin is continuing his thought, and since he says, wait a minute, Zera Yom Asa Hashem Nagilim Zechabo, then he brings another pasuk of Zera Yom Nagilim Zechabach, and then he says Bach Bishuatcha, Bach Biratcha, Bach B'Toratcha. It implies in the midrash itself that what is Rabbi Avin bothered by if in the midrash that he just quoted, he's saying is that it's clearly focused on Torah and Hashem. So then what's the big issue? Right? That's question number 2. And question number 3 is, either way, even if the pasuk itself, what that is, lachem, why does it say lachem? Right? That which it implies that it should be the joy, the chag, that is the simchat chag, is also for you. And it's not either. It's either kulo o chetzio, right? Either totally, like Rabbi Eliezer says, or half it in the Rabbi Yeshua. But either way, right? Why do we see from here that the verse of Shir Hashim, the only one that really the pasuk in Shir Hashim kind of enhances the opinion that it should be fully Lashem, right? So therefore, he's saying is that's why even though you might say there are 3 questions, I really view it as 2 and 2a, because the third question is really a direct correlation to the second question. Either which way. Now he says V'yesh lomar. Now we explain, and he says he's going to answer all 3 questions that he has with a new way of explaining what Rabbi Avin is doing. So he says D'bish lama im lo haya kativ bo. Right. Let's say we didn't understand. Let's say the word bo did not exist.
So we wouldn't understand anything.
Right. So he says Ela za yom asa Hashem nagilu v'nisbecha v'tulo. Right. Let's just say it just said that part. Right. Shapir matzina leparish nagilu v'nisbecha bo ikra Rabbi Eliezer ikra Rabbi Yeshua. Right. We could say then what would we do? We can explain the whole pasuk, the machloket. We could say is either it goes Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Yeshua. No problem. Right. The fact that it comes to say bo means what? It's not coming to. It's coming to lema'et mashu is what he's going to say here. He says here, right? So there he says, Aval safek Rabbi Avin hu mishum dechtiv bo. Rabbi Avin's question is, why does it say the word bo? Bo comes to do what? To lema'et something, to exclude something, right? So he says here, bo v'lo acher, meaning bo the mashma miuta. The mashma miuta bo v'lo acher, right? By saying the word bo, right? The pasuk seems to imply that there should be only one way, right? Bo, right? If it just said nagivin isfacha, then we could say is okay. We can understand both rabbanim in the both amoraim in the Gemara, and we'd say no problem. But since it says bo, the bo comes to say, according to Rabbi Avin, at least the Zera Shimshon understands Rabbi Avin saying is that he says bo seems to say something excluding something, right? Right, just like you would say is. You could say is go to this house, right? So you could say this house and not others, or you could say this house and maybe you'll go to the other ones. So he's saying his bo comes to exclude something, and therefore Rabbi Avin is bothered by it. That's why he's bothered by it. Now he goes and says, therefore he was unsure as to whether bo means that the day should be completely to Hashem or completely to us, right? Therefore he says, well aware of both interpretations of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, but since he was unsure how to interpret the verse in Tehillim, therefore that's the way he answered. That's how Zera Shimshon answers question number 1, which is why does it say the word? Why do we need this pasuk at all? Right? Because it doesn't make sense. So right, we need it. So he says that's the answer to number 1. Now we can answer the next 2 questions. Now we have to understand why does it say Shlomo Melech specifically. Or we're going to answer why Shlomo in general, and then we're going to answer why Shlomo Melech is the one who said it. So he says like this. Rabbi Avin then starts asking his question that Shlomo came to explain that we should celebrate the Chag through celebrating with Hashem, meaning Klomar, the high bo in olima'et. Right? So he says now, the word bo is unlike what we said in the first part, which is why he was unsure about it. He says here, Tehillim is not coming to exclude one type of simcha, ela l'rmos kol yeh birat Hashem, like you said. Shafilu achila v'anat aguf tiyeh birato. Right? You said, just like you said, he's saying is that it's the word bo means that it's coming not to exclude one type of chag or one type of simcha or the other, but rather whatever we're doing, whether it's davening or eating, right? Either it's filu ha'achila, meaning even the achila that we do on chag, which is a mitzvah of the chag itself, is to eat. It should be done with absolute awe, meaning with a fear, a yira. Right? For since someone who eats with physical enjoyment but says it's l'shem shamayim, right, and is also considered attached to Hashem. It follows, therefore, the pasuk Nagila Mesochabach comes afterwards. In lanu echrech lomar shebach ratzah lomar davka b'kadosh baruch hu v'lo ba'achila shta ela mashma nami bach b'yiratach k'mo shemashma nami b'toratcha. Right. So therefore, the pasuk in Shir Hashirim does not to contradict the what we learned about Nagila Mesochabach, but rather both Rabbi Ezra and Rabbi Shua seem to imply some sort of that is like the option of celebrating the Chag one way or the other. Rather, it comes to expand, right? So rather here, the Zera Shimshon says is that Nagila Mesochabach comes to add or enhance, meaning that whatever we're going to do on the Chag, obviously we're going to do something which is to Hashem, which is to celebrate, which is to daven and to learn about the Chag. But he says even the eating that we do, even the Gashmi of the Chag, which like you said, is not necessarily something like on Shabbat. It's Kulol Hashem. Now that we know already. Shabbat is all for Hashem. We take a day off, we take a break, right? But here, the Chag is unsure, based on the Machlok and Beitza. And he says that even the Chag, even on Chag, when we do eat, and we have we're permitted to make food, we're permitted lasot ochel nefesh, when we're eating and we're taking that time to dedicate it to Hashem, then our mindset is right? So then our focus is right. Now, he says, Mishum hachi hosif Rabbi Yitzchak bach b'kaf bet otiyot shekatavta b'Torah. Now we understand why the last part of the Midrash says that Rabbi Yitzchak says the 22 letters that you wrote. In other words, you want to convey that the word Bach is only an allusion to the study of learning of Torah, just like that is not to be taken literally, meaning that the festival, the Chag, should be devoted completely to Hashem, right? But rather is only allusion to the idea that any simcha that we do on the Chag should be together with rejoicing with Hashem, meaning that the Bach it's just like a nice remez. It's not like an addition to the Midrash. It's not a third part of the Midrash. In other words, it's not a third interpretation, but rather it's just a nice way to remember that the word Bach means to say is that whatever we're going to do for Hashem during the Chag, we have to make sure that it's staying with Hashem as opposed to trying to make it some other interpretation. Now,
you don't need all that because you have Samachta
B'chagecha, right? But the question is, simcha is simcha davening or simcha eating? So that's the machloket. You're right. We do follow that. The answer is both. But the machloket in the Gemara says we are not sure which one it is. That's the point. The point is the two psukim atzeret l'Hashem lokecha, or it's we could get along, right? So, but that's the machloket. Anyway, so now we have a question as to why. Now we understand lama dafka shlomo perish levar v'lo shum acher. Right. So now we have to question is why dafka shlomo melech. In the Midrash says why shlomo melech. So now this is a great answer. This is something that again typical Zera Shimshon, where he says like he tries to find out like what's going on here, and he says is shohil shematzin shebinyan binyan beit hamikdash. Right? What happened when Shlomo Melech built a Beit Mikdash? He celebrated for 2 weeks. From the time of Yom Kippur, he even permitted to eat on Yom Kippur on that specific time.
What?
Yes, eating on Yom Kippur was allowed on that because of the Beit HaMikdash. It was so important. And then what happened? They rejoiced for 14 days, which obviously included what? Sukkot. Right? So he says here. Asa Shlomo et hachag b'simcha gdola v'mishtot gedolot. Right? Gedolot. He said Shlomo Melech made a great chag, a huge feast. Shenamar shivat yamim v'shivat yamim arba asar yom. Meaning you should do 14 days. Right? The meaning obviously includes the 7 days of Sukkot. Right? What was going to happen? Your Shlomo Melech is going to say is, well, this year we'll make the exception, but in the future years, what's going to happen? We're going to say is, he made the exception last year, so we're just going to do is every year we're just going to eat ourselves crazy, and therefore what are we doing? We're not really Therefore, it says that's why Shlomo Melech is the one who says Nagim B'Sichabach Sha'af Be'oto Apam Achlu B'Shatu Kol Hayom Mikom Makom B'Pam Acheret Yachol Lasoto Kulo Hashem Kedat Rabbi Eliezer. O ochel v'shoteh, o yoshev v'shoneh. Right? So he's saying is that Shlomo Melech was nervous, or was worried, was concerned that people were going to take it to the wrong direction, meaning only eating on Chag. And he says, no. That's why it says Nagila v'chabach, and that's why the Midrash says b'yiratach, b'shuatach, b'yiratach, and itar. What's that? It doesn't make a difference. Either way, the point is that no, Shuatcha, excuse me, Shuatcha, not Bishuatecha. Bishuatcha, it says that Bishuatcha, what he's saying is that Shlomo Melech was nervous that people were going to take Chag and celebration of Chag in any of the Chagim the wrong way by just eating all day long. And since he didn't want that to happen, therefore Shlomo Melech is the one specifically who said, Bach, Biratcha, B'Toratcha, Bishuatcha, right. So he's saying is that he wants them to know that you should spend the day. You should be eating and drinking. It's not a problem to eat and drink on Chag, but you can't say you shouldn't spend. No, you can't pass the day away by not doing any learning and enjoying and davening. So he's saying, therefore, it says right. Even though they did eat that time at the time of the Beit Mikdash, they did eat the entire day, but that was mikol makom b'pam acheret yachol lasoto kulo Hashem kedav. He's saying, nevertheless, in the future festival, in future Chag, one can actually do is take the day completely to Hashem. So that's what he says. O ochel v'shoteh, o yoshev v'shoneh. Aval av k'she'ochel v'shoteh yeh birat Hashem l'shem mitzvah. He says, even one who chooses to make the Chag about food, which we don't know it's not, but we say, one who chooses to make the Chag about food, or only about food, he has to have in mind what the food is for, what the Chag is all about. Meaning, it's not just enough to say, I'm going to eat food all day. You have to say that the point of me eating food is to celebrate the Chag that I have, that Hashem gave us. Right? You can't just say it's okay. Korbanot now, that was Korbanot then. Now we're talking about nowadays, right? Nowadays we have an issue where we can eat. So he says, well, how do we celebrate the day? By eating. If you don't understand that the eating is only to celebrate the day, that the Chag itself, then what have you really done? You've just taken a day off from work. You said, I can't go to work today. I'm going to eat a lot of food, but I don't really understand that the purpose of me eating that food and celebrating with family and friends is really about me thanking Hashem for the Chag itself. Right? So therefore he says, right? What was the whole point of Shlomo Melech's Chag on that 2-week Chag? He's saying in order to celebrate the Shem Simchat Mitzvah, right? The mitzvah itself of dedicating of the Binyan Beit HaMikdash, and therefore, by the way, this might be another connection as to why the Zera Shimshon picked this week to be the one that he chose this Drush, is because Pinchas is always read during the 3 weeks.
Yeah,
right?
To arouse the basic
Exactly. So now we have so basically what happens. So I was going to conclude.
But that's our tefillah, that we should turn these days of
right.
days of Yom Tovim.
Right. So he says. Let's to summarize Beit Midrash that says then give us Chabod based on Tehillim, which we read it. We say daven on Chagim. So based on that, the Midrash says that Rabbi Avin has a problem with it, a question by it, and then Shlomo Melech comes and says Nagim Chabach, which is a similar pasuk but based on Shir HaShirim, and then he says Bach b'shuatcha, Bach b'yiratcha, Bach b'toratcha, and then in the pasuk, then the next part of the Midrash says Bach, meaning it's because of the gematria of Bach is 22, therefore we should learn Torah. The Zera Shimshon asks 3 questions. Bach is 22 letters of the alphabet, and therefore we use it. Bach. Oh. Anyway, so he says we have
because we're dancing with with the Osis of Torah. That's what gives us gears.
So, exactly. So,
in you.
Right. So anyway, anyways, think of the composer. Anyway, so back to so we have 3. The Zera Shimshon asked 3 questions. One is even without the pasuk that was Nagin Zechabo, we could have asked the same question because the machlokes still exists in the Gemara and Beitzah. Then based on that, he says then the second question is if you read the Midrash, reading the Midrash straight forward, it seems that the first part, the question of Rabbi Avin, is answered by the second part of the Midrash, and therefore, what's the big deal about the Rabbi Avin's question? It's answered right away. Therefore, the answer is that we should be doing it completely for Torah, which is exactly what the Midrash says. And then he says the third question is he says that why does it say lachem? Why is it written for you? It seems that nami. It means that lachem means in addition to something, which is similar to. And therefore, it's not really. I don't think it's 3 questions, but it's 2.5, like two and part 2a, a subsection 2a, right? And therefore, he says, and the answers he gives is as follows. The first one he says is Rabbi Avin did indeed know the machloket about the machloket that exists in the Gemara. He would just didn't understand that the word, if we took out the word bo comes to somehow exclude something, include
The word bo or bach?
bo. And he says Rabbi Avin was bothered by the word Nagila Zacha bo.
Why?
He's bothered because bo is ambiguous, and he says in the Zera Shimshon, what? Right. So as
Boiki.
right. So so the Zera Shimshon reinterprets Rabbi Avin saying his bo comes to somehow exclude something. So it's either this one or the other one. He says, yes, of course I understood. I know the machloket of the Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. I just don't know the answer because bo comes to say it's one or the other. Right. It can't be both. That's answer number one. Number two, as he says, is why does it say Shlomo HaMelech? That it says why Shlomo HaMelech comes to tell us that the Negidus Chabach means that whatever we're going to do on the day, and Negidus Chabot come to tell us it's not to come to exclude, but rather to include. Right? It's the opposite. He's saying is whatever we're going to do on that day, with the framework of Hashem. Right? So yes, you want to eat, you want to daven. It needs to be obviously davening and learning should be within the framework of Hashem. But he's saying the one thing that we can do on Chag, like you said, is to cook and to eat, right, and celebrate and enjoy. But if we're going to just say is we're just going to celebrate and eat without understanding that the point of celebrating and eating on Chag is to thank Hashem for what we have and to really focus on the Chag, then what have we really done? So he's saying that Gidus Chabach comes to tell us that it's whatever we're going to do, whatever we're going to include in the Chag, it has to be for
Hashem, but even
with the food.
Gashmi.
Right. Now the last thing he says is right, exactly, and
Even
then
Lachem is Lashem.
Right.
even Lachem is Lashem, exactly.
So
Now
they both agree then?
no, in Pneumius, Rabbi Avin is not bothered. It's not really bothered by the question of what bo or he's saying is what it is that he's saying is that we have to just kind of understand that whatever way we answer, either Rabbi Yeshua or Rabbi Eliezer, whichever we answer, we have to know that's the context that matters. Now, and the final answer, he says, why is it dafka? Right, it's got context, right? Why is it specifically Shlomo? Zera Shimshon asked. The last thing he says is, why is it specifically Shlomo HaMelech that is the one who says this answer? He says because we have to go back to the history, go back to the Psukim and Malachim that say what when Shlomo HaMelech dedicated the Beit HaMikdash, and there was a 14-day party which included the Shavua Sukkot. They ate for 14 days straight, and one might come to say, wait a minute, the 14 days straight, it didn't get out of hand. There's no question it's going to get out of hand. So Shlomo HaMelech, that's why Shlomo HaMelech Dafka is the one quoted from Shir HaShirim, Bach, meaning that it's always, the whole time that we were celebrating Beit HaMikdash, it was always within the context of the Beit HaMikdash, meaning the context of Hashem. And therefore Shlomo HaMelech is the one who said, and the Torah, right, but the Beit HaMikdash, obviously the Bach itself. Now, what was my concluding story? The concluding story is a nice little thing that I heard. Is basically a grandson wants to get his grandfather. He wants to kind of like outsmart his grandfather. So he says, I have a butterfly in my hand. And whatever I'm going to ask my grandfather, is it alive or dead? Whatever my grandfather says, I'm going to do the opposite. So if he tells me it's alive, I'm going to squish it and it's dead, right? And then if he tells me it's dead, I'm going to make sure that it's alive, and therefore we get him wrong. So the grandson comes to his grandfather and says, so, Grandpa, I've got a butterfly in my hand. What is it, alive or dead? He goes, it is what you make of it. Right? It's the same idea. Right? What is Chag all about? Chag is all about the idea is that what we make of it. It's not one or the other. It's not only Hashem and only to eat. It's both. We have to make, what do we make of the Hashem and what do we make of the Lachem to make the Chag really meaningful? It can't be, if we eat food just to eat on Chag, and we don't say that this is really to recognize and to celebrate the fact that Hashem gave us this Chag at this time of year for whatever whatever we're trying to remember and commemorate, then we haven't done anything. We're just eating. So he's saying that's the whole point and we're supposed to take time to thank Hashem for that. Thanking Hashem does not mean just to eat. It means thanking Hashem by davening and learning about the Chag itself and the meaning of the Chag. So therefore, both are always, like you said, it's Kulo Hashem.
Next week we're in the expanded base midrash.
Bezrat Hashem, next week across the way.
Everyone should tell their friends to come or join us online or in person. Bring your food. We'll hopefully have some more sponsored food. Bezrat Hashem. Everyone should keep reaching out to zerashimshon.com for all our beautiful shirim downloadable. And we should, please God, be doing many more classes together with the Korbanos, with the Gilev and Ismachabo, with Mordechai, with Charles in person, with everyone together.
We should learn, we should understand that the korbanot that we're missing, and now we have davening, the davening that we have on a daily basis, and the davening that we have in Chagim should be, since the davening is instead of korbanot nowadays, we should take the opportunity to really focus on our davening properly, so that way when we do have the opportunity to give the korbanot, Hashem really understands that the context was right the whole time.
Amen.
Ah. You know, Mordechai, it's interesting that those 2 weeks celebration was over a Chag.